Good evening, everyone. Happy Thursday. I am Avis Driver, D39 Democratic Club Chair, and of course, Precinct Chair for D39. Thank you all for participating this evening. We have a few members we want to acknowledge: elected officials, Evan Glass, Lorianne Sales, Karen Bushell. And thank you for participating also. The lineup for this evening is Delegate Kirill Resnick, Delegate Leslie Lopez, Delegate Gabriel Acevero, and then Senator Nancy King. Thank you all for participating this evening. I know you have busy schedules, so we really appreciate you coming in and speaking with us for a few minutes. And Linda Foley would like to share a few words, so I'm going to turn it over to her. Linda.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, as Avis said, for coming, and thank you to the District 39 Democratic Club and the Germantown Democratic Club for hosting this event. I just wanted to mention a couple things. I'm Linda Foley. I'm chair of the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee. And I wanted to mention a couple of things related to the party. One is that we have a big event coming up on May 10th. We cannot do our annual brunch this year, which is a big event that people like in the spring because we're still under COVID restrictions. But we are having an evening with Senator Barbara Mikulski. That is a fundraiser. It's virtual. It's May 10th at 7 o'clock. And the details were in our newsletter, and you'll be getting the details several times between now and then. So please, if you'd like, please sign up and help us out. We will take bundled contributions. If you're interested in that, you can send me an email at chair@mcdcc.org. I'll put my email in the chat. I also wanted to mention that we are beginning already to work on the 2022 election, which is what we've known as the gubernatorial cycle. And all of our local and state elected officials are up for election. And we're beginning work on that already. We've already had one precinct leaders training. We're going to do training for precinct leaders and new precinct leaders once a month, virtual training, just what it means to be a precinct leader and what we're going to be expecting you to do. And stay tuned, because in the next month or so, we're going to begin knocking on doors and doing a listening tour with our precinct leaders. We're going to be doing listening tours in their neighborhoods to find out what issues voters care about. So we're gearing up for 2022, and we hope that that you'll be there with us as we move forward and elect a Democratic governor, as well as other Democrats across the state. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you for the time, and enjoy the evening. And now I will turn it over to Delegate Resnick.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see everyone. Thank you for being here with us tonight. It is, hopefully this is the last one we have to do like this. Hopefully the next one we do like this is in person and we can all see each other and get together. And, we never thought you'd hear us say this, but we miss feeding you all. So I want to welcome everyone. It's so great to see so many of our friends, our constituents, a lot of familiar faces, a couple folks who are not familiar, which is also really good. We're going to do a quick wrap up. We're going to go me, Leslie, Gabe, then Nancy, and then we'll take a whole bunch of questions. So we'll just do a quick wrap up of the session. It was an interesting session. I will say we accomplished a great deal, and we're really proud of the work we came out with. If it wasn't for all the things we accomplished, it probably would have been the worst session we've ever had. Between all the social distancing and the arrangements, and those of us poor suckers in the annex had to be stuck in the annex, what we call the Marriott ballroom, barely being able to participate in the debate. But at the end of the day, the work got done. We were able to hold hearings. In many ways, it was the most open session that we've ever had. Everything was streamed. Every committee hearing, every subcommittee hearing, every voting session, everything was streamed and recorded. That is something that I think we will not stop doing. That is something that I think will continue and everybody will get to participate and watch. Whether or not people will continue to be able to testify via Zoom, that we'll see. I think all of us, all four of us experienced now that everybody in the state of Maryland could have just zoomed in and testified on any bill they wanted. There were a few jokers that decided to sign up for everything. And so we would see them constantly on every single hearing in every committee, same people over and over and over again, with absolutely no real sense of the bill, never having read the bill, but liking the title and deciding that they felt like they wanted to testify. So the power of democracy. So from my perspective, I continue to be on the Appropriations Committee. I continue to chair the Health and Social Services Subcommittee. I think a lot of the action this year happened on the budget side. We saw a lot of really great things happen. We started the session worried that we would be about $1 billion underwater. And between a very healthy revenue report that we were not expecting, and all the aid that came from the federal government, thanks to President Biden's relief bill, we not only paid and fully funded everything, we provided an incredible relief package of our own for COVID relief. We were able to leave a great healthy balance in the budget. We were able to save the rainy day fund, and we have eliminated the structural deficit for 2 years going forward. And so that's something that's frankly unprecedented, and it's incredible that we got to do, and it's great to be a part of it. So from all those perspectives, a great session, an incredible accomplishment. Nobody ever wants to hear about the budget and the boring stuff that Nancy and I and Gabe do in the budget committees, but it is probably the most important thing we do. It is the only thing that we are constitutionally required to do. So without us, the work of the state wouldn't continue. I'll wrap it up real quickly. I didn't put in a lot of bills this year. I only put in 6 bills this year, which for me is kind of on the lower side. I tend to put in a few more. And I can say that I had success with 4 of them. I didn't pass 4 of them. I passed 2 of them, but I had success with 4 of them. The 2 that I passed, one is a bill that I'm very proud of. It's a bill that puts guardrails on the governor's authority to spend money for emergency procurement. Y'all heard the case about the South Korean test kits that we got that we then had to send back and pay more money to get more for. The Blue Flame Medical, where we randomly wrote a $12 million check to some company that didn't exist a week earlier because they had a friend in the governor's office. So with myself and Senator Clarence Lamb from Howard County, we put in legislation that really put some controls on emergency procurement. And again, one of those things that nobody really talks about, really boring procurement, but I happen to be a procurement nerd, and these are some of the things that I feel very accomplished about. The second bill I passed was a bill that I've been fighting for 3 years, which is to put feminine height or menstrual hygiene products into school bathrooms across the state. And thanks to the legislation that I passed with another great partner, Senator Sarah Elfrith of Anne Arundel County, we passed the legislation. It's going to the governor's desk. Starting next year, at least 1 bathroom and then more as the years go on in every single school in this state will be required to have a menstrual products dispenser with products there for free for the students to be able to use. I'm a little disappointed because we couldn't get the boys' bathrooms in the bill. I was kind of bummed out about that, but there is no prohibition on schools putting it in themselves. It's a mandate. It's not a ceiling, and hopefully we'll come back and in a year or 2 and try again with that. But at least we've gotten that process started. And then just 2 highlights real quick of 2 other things that we got to pass. Got to pass a bill dealing with funding our local health departments. They have been woefully underfunded for years. The formula has been out of whack for years. And especially in the last year, we've seen how much our local health department stepped up. So I worked with MACO and we were able to pass legislation to put in a formula to fund local health departments at double the rate that they currently get, which is really exciting. And last but not least is the bill that doesn't have my name on it, but I've been pushing for it for 4 years. We repealed the state song, which I'm very happy about. For those of you that don't know, it's not a big issue. It's not something that a lot of people sit up at night worried about. But our song is literally a Confederate love letter. Was a poem written by a Confederate sympathizer who moved from Baltimore to New Orleans during the Civil War. It is a song that calls Lincoln a tyrant and a despot. It calls on Maryland to secede from the Union. It calls the North the Northern scum. It is an awful song, and it does not represent us anymore. And we know that because whenever it's sung, only 2 stanzas of the 7 are sung. So we know that we've always been embarrassed about it. So we finally got that repealed. That's going to the governor's desk too. So all in all, a very successful session. I wish I could have gotten up on the floor and talked a little bit more this session, but it is what it is. So very happy the way it's turned out. And I'm going to turn it over to Delegate Leslie Lopez for her perspective. She got some really good stuff done this year too.
Thank you, Corel. It's good to see everybody virtually. I know we're each inching towards all getting vaccinated where we could see each other in person. So when we meet in person again, maybe a metaphorical hug, but I'll give you an elbow tap until things become even more neutralized. So I am the lone member of the D39 delegation that is not on a money committee. I'm on judiciary, which means we have the most bills, usually the longest hours, the most emotional subject matter. And, it's really fulfilling because the work that we do, it has like such a huge impact on people's lives that you can directly see. But this session in particular, I feel really proud of the work that we did, particularly on police reform. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there a question?
No, that's okay. It was just an open mic, Leslie. I turned it off.
Okay, no problem. So I know that there's probably a lot of questions about this, and I want to do something that I always hate doing, but I want to kind of give you a read off of some bullet points just to make sure that I don't miss anything. And then after that, happy to answer any questions that you might have. So for police reform this year, on the House side, the Speaker put together a bill that was basically the result of 10 months of work from the working group on police reform. And our delegate Acevero was a part of that working group and heard a lot of the same testimony that I heard in the committee. But as a subcommittee member, we had to go through and take that Speaker's bill and flesh it out and really bring it to a point that it made sense for the direction that we wanted to go in the state. So the big accomplishments of that was that we did a full repeal of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, which was basically the first in the nation officers' Bill of Rights that protected them from a lot of different types of discipline. So we repealed that, and then we replaced it with a lot of different things. One of the big things that we replaced it with is that there would be an independent investigation of any police-related death. Now, as someone who works on gun bills, I always find it very interesting that 2% of all gun-related deaths in the state are actually from police shootings, which is pretty high for the country. So now, anytime that there's a police shooting and a police-related death, it will go to this independent unit that will investigate what happens. We also have local civilian oversight of police departments via what's called police accountability boards. They're appointed, there are certain standards for what they can do. Those police accountability board people appoint other layers of civilian oversight that I'll talk about in a second. We have consistent disciplinary standards for all police officers when they violate certain disciplinary issues, whether it's the big issues or whether it's smaller infractions like You didn't pull up your socks or your uniform isn't in violation, or you have cases of harassment, like sexual harassment within your ranks. Now we've made it so that every single officer has to be disciplined in the same manner. Something that we had seen over the course of my work in the committee is that officers of color were being punished in a way that was disproportionate to their white peers. So we've done that. We've also made it so that every layer of discipline is sandwiched between some type of local civilian oversight. So you have the police accountability boards that do a lot of appointing. And then you have internal affairs, which will do the investigation, but they have absolutely no disciplinary power. They turn that over to a board of civilians that are called an administrative charging committee that will review what has happened and then make a determination, like an innocent guilty type of thing. If the police officer doesn't like that or wants to contest it, then they can be seen by a trial board, which is all civilians too. So for every layer of discipline, there's civilian oversight included. Other things that we did outside of the speaker's bill was we put a ban on chokeholds and made it so that there's only a necessary use of force as the threshold. Previously to that, it was reasonable, and that's a very gray area. We wanted to make it clear that you cannot, as a police officer, do anything that's disproportionate to the threat that you're seeing. We put really severe limitations on no-knock warrants. So basically now, if an officer wants to issue a no-knock warrant, it's about a week-long process, and it can't involve anything that has to do with property. So before it used to be like, okay, someone has guns or someone has drugs and they're trying to get rid of them. Now it's really like a life or death situation. Like if there was an issue of like human trafficking where they had to go in and save people's lives, that would be an issue where a no-knock warrant might be issued. We also have public access to police disciplinary records. It's also a requirement or condition of employment that any incoming police officer disclose any disciplinary records that they might have. We've made it a requirement so that there's body cameras in every jurisdiction. We made it so that local police jurisdictions can't buy like tanks from the military. That seems reasonable. And then also the one thing that was not controversial is that we put the Baltimore Police Department back in the control of Baltimore City. So yeah, that was the one thing the governor didn't veto. But we passed it, and it's now law, or it will be enacted shortly. So that's all the police reform stuff. We did a bunch of other cool stuff too, like made it so that we can't imprison children for life without parole, which is a thing that we had done in the state. We made it so that we can't have any private immigration centers like what you're seeing on the border, where families are separated and people are being forced to have hysterectomies and all sorts of those horrible things. In terms of my own bills, the one that I had the most success with is my student loan debt bill, which is really like the third year that I've been working on it. It passed almost unanimously in the House, but unfortunately there were 3 Republican senators who were a bit grumpy about the police reform stuff. So they killed it in the last hour and a half before sine die. I'm still not over it. I'm in the maybe 4th stage of grief when it comes to this bill, because I cannot believe that all that work just went down the hill, went down the drain. But we're very close. Next year is going to be the year. The other thing I work on, like I mentioned before, was guns. I had a ghost gun bill that was the result of about 3 years of work. Also, I learned how to make an AR-15 for this bill. During the hearing, an AR-15 was pulled on me, which was a cheap thrill, something I had never experienced before, from a colleague nonetheless. So certainly tensions are high when it comes to gun legislation still, but President Biden's on our side. Hopefully there's an executive order soon, and then we can have some state legislation that can reinforce that as well. But that's a brief summary. It doesn't feel very brief because there's a lot of details, but I'm happy to answer any other questions you have about police reform or criminal justice work, anything like that. And I'll kick it over to Delia Acevero.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you to the MCDCC for helping to facilitate this evening's legislative wrap up, to our chair, Linda, my friend, Michael, all the folks on. Really appreciate you all hopping on so we could just give you a little brief update on what we did this past legislative session. As was mentioned, my name is Gabriel Acevero. I'm one of your 3 delegates that represent you. Proud to serve you in Annapolis on the House Appropriations Committee, along with Krill. We oversee the state's capital and operating budget, social services, et cetera. We deal with collective bargaining rights. I sit on the House Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee, which really oversees the budget for a good bit of our state's criminal justice agencies. This year, I would agree, was certainly very historic in terms of what we did, not just on police reform, but on a number of other areas that I think is deserving of a little shine, whether it's the Juvenile Restoration Act, ending the sentencing of life in prison without the possibility of parole for children. The United States is the only country that does this, and the fact that Maryland led this session is certainly worth noting. To protections, expanding EITC for families, I-10 filers, and immigrants across our state, so that they're also getting some help and relief during this time. I also think it's really important for us to look at what we did around police reform, but also what we still need to do in terms of really building community trust and really addressing police violence in a comprehensive way. So I introduced a good bit of bills. I'm not going to go through them because I'll go through a couple rather, because you would have received an end of session letter or report from all of our offices about what we did this past session, what we worked on, as well as the money that we brought back for really needed improvements and projects right here in the district. So for example, whether it's whether it's funding for the Fox Chapel neighborhood park, which provides $150,000 to the MoCo Department of Parks to replace and to refresh the Fox Chapel neighborhood park, but also a grant to assist the Jewish Foundation for group homes. It provides $150,000 to Jewish Foundation for group homes to purchase a home in District 39, where there would be options for persons to be able to live with and call home people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So I think it's important to highlight those. As folks know, police transparency and accountability is an issue that I've been advocating, working on prior to, as well as since being elected to the House of Delegates. It's an issue that I ran on that I believe that is way overdue, that we look at in a very comprehensive way. And this session, we certainly looked at quite a bit. Delegate Lopez highlighted just some of the things that we did. I'm not going to reiterate that because we did quite a bit to ensure that we're really reforming police in a way that we didn't do before. I just want to also mention that Anton's Law, which is legislation that I have introduced since being elected with Senator Jill P. Carter from Baltimore City. I'm really proud to say that that passed this session in a really strong posture, and that's the most important thing. And for folks who aren't familiar, Anton's Law is named after Anton Black, a case that is very much connected to the George Floyd case, because the former Maryland medical examiner, David Fowler, testified in the Derek Chauvin trial, and now the Attorney General is investigating and looking at cases where he have done autopsy reports. So this young man, in essence, not only didn't receive, his family didn't receive any transparency, but really any kind of accountability in this case. And so we worked with the family and the Coalition for Justice for Anton Black, as well as the Maryland Coalition for Justice and Police Accountability, to put together Anton's Law, which has dealt with MPIA, the Maryland Public Information Act, but also reforming the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. That was the version last year, and it would have established a statewide use of force. So it's good to see that a lot of that we passed this session, from a statewide use of force standard, which I think is big. We're the first state to have done this, to MPIA reform, which means that now there will be transparency in the way that law enforcement agencies and individuals operate in our community, and ensuring that an officer's background and misconduct record is public. And this is really important because there was a Goucher College poll that was done last year that showed 87% of Marylanders support making police misconduct and investigative records public and maintaining a database. And so that's what Anton's Law would have always done, because we can't really have accountability and change the systems if we don't know what they're doing and there's no kind of a transparency whatsoever. So I would say that was huge, because everything falls after transparency. We can't have accountability without transparency. We can't have oversight if we don't have transparency. We cannot have change if we don't have that. So it's really good to see that this was something that was passed in a strong posture. I would honestly have liked to see us go a little bit further. When I was on the House work group on police accountability, I raised a number of issues that I believe the work group should have also looked at, that was very much related to police violence and police accountability, and whether that's white nationalism in law enforcement, whether that's ending qualified immunity, banning no-knock warrants, dealing with the issue of police in schools and the disproportionate arrests of children, Black and brown children. All of these issues are issues that are very much related to police accountability. And I just don't think when it comes to this issue, we should be, waiting for communities to come back and to share their trauma in order for us to do more. But we did do quite a bit. Maryland led the rest of the country in terms of police reform legislation. We still have a good bit of work to do, so I would just ask folks to continue to be engaged, because I would say we did, 85%, which is quite a bit. When you talk about a body that's 188 members and getting folks to agree on something, it becomes a difficult thing to do, right? And I recognize that. So there's still work outstanding. And like Delegate Resnick, I'll say I had success with 2 bills. One being Anton's Law. It's good to see that that is something that passed, and we can provide some measure of closure to the family and to the community that are calling for transparency, but also a bill that I co-sponsored with Senator King, the Sign Language Interpreters Act, that in essence would ensure that sign language interpreters was not only a regulated, but a licensed a profession, and we're ensuring that the folks who are sign language interpreters are certified by the state, are meeting certain standards. And it's really about consumer protection and for the deaf and hard of hearing community right here in Maryland. We got really close, but I think the bill needed a little bit more work. And so we've gotten a commitment from the governor's office of deaf and hard of hearing and other groups for us to work on this in the interim, and I think we could get it done next session. Introduce a good bit of other stuff, but I'll stop right there so that we could open it up for questions later on. But thank you all very much for being here again. It is an honor and a privilege to represent District 39 in Annapolis, and to work with the other members of our District 39 team to accomplish and to bring back the bacon, if you will, for folks that live here. So thanks.
I think I'm next. I would just like to take a second to thank Michael Tardif and Andrew Sondry and Peter Witzler for putting together yet another of our Zoom calls. There's a lot of details involved in all that, and we couldn't do it without you guys. So I appreciate that a whole lot. As most of you know, I'm on the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee, and I'm also the Senate Majority Leader. So it kind of being the majority leader puts me on the leadership team. So I get to be really a part of all the major decisions and the major actions with the Senate. So that to me is a real plus for Montgomery County, because I can make sure in all of the meetings that we get our fair share and and people are listening to us. So that to me is a real plus. We passed a $52.4 billion budget. And it covers some of our vulnerable citizens, invest in education, public transportation, and does it all without raising any taxes or fees. People like to say that we raise taxes all the time, and we have not for the last several years. So that we've got that going for us. We had $4.5 billion in capital funds, and which creates about 30,000 new jobs. In District 39, I was able to get money for the Fox Chapel Park, the playground for the kids. And I also got $3.25 million for an addition for the Germantown Fire Department on Crystal Rock, which will give them a 2-story addition so they can fit all their equipment into it. And they're just thrilled to death over it. So that'll be a real good thing for our area. We got money for the purchase and renovation of the Jewish group homes, so that helps them a lot. Last year we passed the blueprint for education, the Kerwin plan. This year we passed the blueprint 2.0, which is really to help with all the COVID issues that we came up with. It'll fund the intensive tutoring, summer school, adds money to the state's basic education formula for education technology. It supports students' socio emotional and health, and ensures the responsible use of federal funds. One of the big things that we've been worrying about a lot is, we started session thinking that we were not going to have enough money to fund everything. And then all of a sudden we had gobs of money and trying to figure out how to spend it and where to put it in the best places. But now the big issue with all of us, I think, is making sure that the money is spent correctly, and there's got to be some accountability. So that is one of the big issues that we have been talking a lot about, is just making sure that every dollar is spent right. We can't waste any. We will probably never have an opportunity like we had this year with the money. And I'm telling you, it was between capital money and operating money, it was just crazy to have that kind of funding. So yeah, we just have to be sure that we're taking care of that. Unemployment is a huge issue with us right now. Well, it has been since the pandemic started, but all of our staffs are working on the unemployment issues. We get phone calls. I've got a staff person that spends at least 25 hours a week on it. It is a mess there, but I had a meeting with the Senate president and the secretary yesterday on the unemployment, and there are hundreds of thousands of unemployment cases still, and just trying to get them completed, and people get answers that they promised they would send everybody an answer once a week. Well, all they're sending them is, well, we're working on it. But we have people that haven't gotten their funding since like October. So like I said, our staffs are working hard. If you know anybody that's having a problem and we can help them out, we're happy to do that. They call my office, and Patty Horton in my office is just doing a great job. She's got a pretty good connection in the unemployment office. And So they've been able to get answers where other people can't. So that's one of the big things that we've been working on and will continue to do. We had a lot of different bills, environmental bills, and there was one big one, the Climate Solutions Now bill, that I really thought we were going to be able to do and get settled. But it ended up that the chairman of the two committees that work on these bills just tangled through the whole session and never could come to an agreement, and it died. So we're hoping that by next year, cooler heads will prevail and we'll be able to get something done, because it is absolutely critical to make that happen. So that will come again. One of my best bills was the child care tax credit bill, and that has been kind of the focus, my focus for the last several years, is the whole issue of childcare and making it affordable and getting people, if we want to get people back to work, we have to have childcare that's available for everybody. So we put quite a bit of money into that, and with this tax credit, I think will help families and get them back to work. So that's kind of the crux of what I worked on this year, and mainly just budget and trying to figure out how best to spend the money. But I think Montgomery County made out very well. And yeah, we're real happy with the outcome. So with that, I would like to, Andrew, who's going to take the questions?
I'll be reading the questions for all of you, and I'll
Okay.
sort of pass them out to the group. So thank you so much, Senator King, and
There you
thank you to all of the delegates in District 39. My name's Andrew. I'm the president of the Germantown Democratic Club, and we're co-sponsoring this event. And I'm going to go through a couple of the questions that we had pre-submitted, and just sort of throw them out to the delegation or to specific members if they were addressed to specific members. If you have any additional questions, feel free to add them to the chat, and I'll be able to pull them from there as well. But I'm going to start off with one that we got from a lot of people, which I'll throw to all of you, which was just, what was your most favorite thing that you passed this session? What was the thing that you're most proud of? And we'll start with you, Senator King, and we'll go reverse order.
I think probably my favorite bill would be the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, because I just think that will help families out a whole lot, and that's really my goal at this point.
And the next, Delegate Acevedo.
Anton's Law. Been a bill I've been working on for some time, and good to see it pass, and passed in a strong posture, which is particularly difficult when you talk about the legislative process. Bills don't typically come out the way you put it in, and you got to make sure that you're keeping an eye on it to ensure that you're keeping it as strong of a language as possible. But I would say Anton's Law this session.
And Delegate Lopez.
Yeah, so outside of the ones that have already been mentioned, I think the Essential Workers Bill of Rights was a really important move, making sure people who are on the front lines, who are, doing all the work to keep us going, have protections, was a really great one. That wasn't in my committee, but I was happy to vote on it as soon as it hit the floor and be supportive as much as I could otherwise.
And Delegate Resnick.
Thanks, Andrew. And I'd have to say the menstrual products bill. And the really great part about the bill is obviously we get to help a lot of students. The surprisingly fun part about the bill is watching the expression on people's faces when they realize that a male legislator sponsored it.
All righty, thank you all so much. The next question that I have, so we got a lot of questions that were pre-submitted about specific pieces of legislation that didn't pass, and whether or not you thought they would have some legs in the next session, whether they'd be able to get passed. So I'll just sort of read through a couple of the bills that people mentioned, and if anyone feels that they can talk about a specific piece of legislation, maybe what went wrong and whether you think that it's a viable next session, then feel free to pick up from there. But the pieces of legislation that people mentioned were the Climate Solutions Now Act, the Renters Bill or House Bill 31, Delegate Acevedo's SRO bill, There were a couple of bills on voting rights, and those were the ones that people called out. So if anyone feels strongly about any of those specific pieces of legislation and you want to talk about maybe what went wrong and what we can do next time, all yours.
I've got one bill that passed actually that turned out to be a pretty good bill, and it's it's about electronic book titles going to public libraries. Amazon and Audible have over 20,000 exclusive titles on books, but they would not offer those to the public libraries, or they would offer them at such a high price they couldn't afford to buy them. So this said that they had to make those same titles available to the libraries, along with being able to sell them on Amazon or Audible. So people that do electronic books at the library have been thrilled over it. So that was a good one for the community.
Excellent. Thank you so much. If any of the other delegates want to jump in on pieces of legislation that
none of the ones that were mentioned were in my committee, but I know people have talked to me about some of the housing bills. I think, police reform took up a lot of the committee's time. And I think that there were some issues in those last minute discussions about those bills that didn't quite get resolved. But certainly the chair understood the importance of them, and he had his own kind of bills to push things forward. So I think that the work continues, and it's one of a handful of disappointments of things we didn't get to this session, but it definitely was a priority.
I think one thing that troubled me a little bit about this session, and I'm hoping that it probably troubled my House members also, but there was such a feeling in Annapolis of the House being here and the Senate being here, and oh, the House is better, oh, the Senate's better, and instead of just really working together on trying to get some bills done, there was just to me a lot of that, but hearing more of that in the leadership realm more than anything. But I would hope that we can drop some of that at some point and just work to get stuff done. So just my opinion, Delegate Resnick.
I'd offer up that if the Senate wants to pass my bill that passed unanimously in the House as the first way to signal that truce, I would be willing to say let's end exploitative student loan practices.
We're starting
just to put it out there publicly.
I don't know that we want to do here, but
and
I completely
people voted against it. Total.
And I completely concur with Senator King. Senate's great. If they hadn't taken her 13 years ago, I wouldn't be in the House. So
there you
go. I can talk a little bit. I've done a lot, though not my committee, I've done a lot of work on election reform. So there clearly are always going to be bills that don't pass in specific topics. We did actually a fair amount of election reform legislation. We created a permanent absentee ballot list, which is incredibly critical. What it would do is it would require, if you sign up for an absentee ballot, you will always get the absentee ballot. You don't have to go and re-sign over and over and over again. And that's going to be very important to folks who lack mobility, who lack the ability to access that kind of service. So we did that. We expanded early voting sites. The one election bill I think we fought very hard over in the House. We eventually passed it, but it just didn't make it across the finish line in the Senate that I can remember, is the bill that would reform the countywide election seats for county commissioners. This is a bill that was sponsored by our colleague Brian Crosby from St. Mary's County, Southern Maryland, somewhere in Southern Maryland. And what the situation we have is that if you live in a commission state, we live in a charter county, meaning we have a county council and a county executive. Most of our counties in the state are commission states, meaning that you elect a commission and then that commission governs. They don't have a county executive. So they serve as both the legislative and executive functions. In a lot of the counties that we have this arrangement, people are elected they run from a district but are elected at large by the county. Very similar to the way our Board of Elections, Board of Education seats run. And in many of those states, that has prevented many communities from just being represented on their county councils, because if the entire county can vote for an individual, then whether or not they come from a particular part of the county doesn't matter. Even if they have to run from that county, that way you get at least people from all parts of the county running for the board, but you still get elected countywide. So there was a bill to push to eliminate that. There was a lot of static that we heard from our Republican colleagues who like this arrangement, pointing specifically to Montgomery County and the way we elect school board. And so we said, okay, you're right. So we added Montgomery County and we added school boards to that bill. We fought about it for a long time. I think we had, my colleagues can remind, I think we debated it for at least 3 days in combination. Send it over to the Senate, and it stayed there. And so I know that it's an important bill for Delegate Crosby. I think we should have passed it. I think the Democratic caucus voted for it unanimously, I believe, on the House side. And so we need to get that one passed. If there are other bills that deal with elections that people have questions about that I'm just not remembering, more than happy to discuss them. One thing you all have to remember, though, is everything was slower this year. And I will give you an example of why many things did not pass. The House was split between the main chamber and the annex. The annex was set up to where we each had a booth and we could vote on iPads. But if we wanted to speak, we didn't have a microphone. We had to request to speak. The speaker from the other chamber had to acknowledge us. We then had to get up, go to what we lovingly refer to as the telephone booth, speak from the telephone booth, and then go sit down. And before another individual could come and speak from the telephone booth, it had to be cleaned. So an employee, a state house employee, went in there with the Clorox wipes and the Lysol and everything else and wiped everything down before another person could come and speak. And if you were debating from the annex, meaning the person who was the floor leader was in the annex and the person who was arguing with you was in the annex, you literally had to go through this dance every single time. That took an exceptional amount of time. We also had to go, there was a similar telephone booth set up in the main chamber, where if you're in the annex and you're the floor leader on a bill, and there's going to be, we anticipate a lot of questions, we had to get up from the annex, walk across the street, potentially miss votes. I think most of us missed at least a couple of votes walking back and forth between the annex and the main chamber. So things took so much more time than they would have in a regular session. And when you do that, and when our Republican colleagues know that and decide to take advantage of the rules to be able to speak ad nauseum about bills, that stretches the debate. And what ends up happening is we just don't have the time to be able to get as many things across the floor as we want. So a lot of those bills that didn't pass, we probably like them. We probably want to see them pass, but we just weren't able to do it this session.
Yeah, I'll also add about the Climate Solutions Act. I know there was a good bit of finger pointing between the House and the Senate on why we didn't get it done, et cetera. I think we all agree that, climate change is an existential threat. It is difficult, especially when we're talking about, big issues, whether it's police reform or climate action. Getting two chambers to agree on two different committees. And I think, those were one of those situations where the bill or the issue ultimately is what didn't make it. But I think a lot of folks, there's a lot of support for the climate solution, just speaking for the House, and wanting to go as far as we can as far as climate action. And I think folks should keep an eye on it. I think it'll come back up next session and certainly pass. As far as my bill, the Police Free Schools Act, I know there's a good bit of discussion right here in Montgomery County around police in schools and SRO programs. I think it's an issue that is one of the biggest challenges in education today and has been ever since we started introducing SROs in schools with police and arrest powers, et cetera. I would really like us to just think about what safety for all of our kids look like, and for us to envision and to move towards that, rather than thinking that an armed police with arrest powers is how we keep all of our kids safe and keep our schools safe. And again, according to the Maryland Department of Education, 70% of school-based arrests are for minor infractions. What do I mean by minor infractions? Fights, disruption, skipping school, drugs. 70%. We're arresting kids for pretty much what you would expect from adolescent behavior. And so we really got to rethink that system. We got to rethink what it means to keep all of our kids safe. And I think anyone that looked at, and I couldn't look at the entire video, but anyone that looked at that video of that 5-year-old Black child in Montgomery County, and the way he was treated, and that interaction alone just speaks to why we should be showing up and embracing our kids with support and services, and not people that see them as inherent criminals.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, you were talking about how many bills had passed. There were 2,369 bills introduced and 817 passed. We in the Senate, because we have so many fewer people, we were able to all be in the Senate chambers, but we had what looked like, well, we called mine a fortune teller booth. It was a plexiglass booth that, like a phone booth, but we were able to all be there. And I was concerned when session started about being in Annapolis, but I'll tell you, every single precaution was taken, and the Senate was tested twice a week for COVID, and I never felt unsafe through the whole thing. Stayed in my hotel, and everything was very well done. So I think we got through it pretty well. I do want to mention there's a thing called the 90-day report. If you go to the General Assembly website, you can get that. It has every bill that was introduced and every bill that passed, and kind of is a whole synopsis of what happened during the session. So I invite you to get on the website and take a look.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I'm going to start taking some questions from the audience. I see the first one that was put in here that I saw, at least, and I apologize if I missed any, so feel free to message me if I have. But the first one that I saw in here was from Marilyn Balcom, who is, of course, the president of the Germantown Gaithersburg Chamber of Commerce, as well as a candidate for county council in 2022. And she had a question about the unemployment insurance tax for businesses. So Marilyn, if you'd like to ask your question, feel free to go ahead.
Sure, thanks. And thank you all for the work that you're doing with constituent service for unemployment. That really has been fantastic. So thank you. Businesses have seen an incredible increase in the unemployment insurance tax. There's a gap situation where federal funding will replenish, but it doesn't start until July 2022, so July 2021, but there's a gap. And so we've seen increases 200, 300, 400% go out this month. So I don't know if we're stuck with that. And if we are, we're hoping to see them come back down in July. Any thoughts on that or any intel?
I've not heard of any yet so far, but I am happy to look into that and get an answer for you.
Great, thanks. I'll send you an email.
Okay.
Thank you.
Speaking of unemployment, we did have a couple of questions that people had submitted in advance that were on the same topic.
Okay.
I was wondering if each of you could put into the chat contact information for your offices so that constituents who are having trouble with unemployment can reach out to you and get some help dealing with those unemployment things. And while you're entering that information in the chat, I'll go to the next question that I saw there, which is from Douglas Riemel, which is about redistricting and how it might affect this district. So Douglas, if you'd like to read your question. Otherwise, I can read it for
Sure,
you.
sure. Yeah, I'm just curious how, I know the numbers just came out a couple days ago, but I was just curious how the district may be affected. That's all. I guess specifically since I live in Clarksburg, I'm wondering if we might
can't lose you
still be
again.
part.
Well, we'd hate to lose you, Doug. So we just, there's a couple of steps here that still need to happen. We got state level numbers. We still have not gotten more detailed numbers about county or municipalities or where things have shifted. That's going to come later in the summer. So we actually cannot start looking at redistricting until those numbers come out. The one thing we know is we gained, I can't remember the exact number, like 17% of our population as a state as a whole. We are not gaining or losing any members of Congress, so we're staying stable, which is great. And actually we need to give major kudos to the statewide census team that was put together. Delegate Janelle Wilkins led the Montgomery County effort. And we did not have happen to us what happened to New York. And I don't know how many of you have heard, but New York lost a congressional seat. Had they had 68 more people fill out their census, they would have kept the seat. 68 people in New York, which has, I don't know what, 20 million people living in there. So when you see Janelle, make sure to give her a thank you for the effort that she led, and all the other regional leaders throughout around the state as well. Once we get the data, we can start looking at both federal and state maps, and then the county will start looking at the county maps. And the county maps are going to be very interesting because, as you all know, we're getting 2 more county district seats. So we're going to be up to 11 council members, and we're going to have 2 more districts. And nobody, round and round we go, nobody knows where it'll stop. Who knows how those districts will look? There's no way to know, but start talking to your council now. As far as state goes, the only real information we have based on sort of the ongoing tracking data is that Montgomery County may, and I emphasize may, get an additional single member seat, meaning in the House of Delegates, meaning we've grown just enough to be able to get a partial district of 1 member. Something that we used to have many years before 1992, when District 39 was actually formed. We actually had a partial district with Howard County and a partial district with Prince George's County. So that may happen, in which case we'll have to add, and it will likely be, if that happens, it'll likely be either in the north part of the county or the eastern part of the county, because it would have to overlap with another county. So it may dramatically affect District 39 and the way that that those lines are drawn. If we get an additional sub-district, things will get a little more compact. So who knows what that will look like. The other thing that everybody should know is we don't know right now the process by which we will be adopting the new maps. So if the numbers come out, say August, September, there are several possibilities. One possibility is a special session is going to be called for us to be able to go in and adopt maps. We can do it at the beginning of the general session. A lot of that depends. This is an issue that we did not have to deal with last time around. A lot of that depends on whether or not we think the governor would veto the state map. He can't veto the federal map, but he can veto the state map. And if that's the case and we do it in a special session, do we stay 10 days in a special session so that we can override the veto, or do we come back? So there's a lot of complication. What adds to the complication is the filing deadline for candidates is February. It's still February. That has not changed, and we have not gotten an indication that that will also change. So there is a possibility, and I sincerely hope this doesn't happen, and we need to prevent it from happening, but there is a very sincere possibility that we may finalize the maps after the filing deadline, in which case people will file to run and then get a letter in the mail from Board of Elections saying, congratulations for filing in District 39, you're now running in District 15. Which would suck for everybody. And I hope that that doesn't happen, but that is a possibility given the very condensed calendar. So hopefully that answers some questions. At the end of the day, the answer is we don't know, but hopefully that's a lot of detail of we don't know.
And thanks for anticipating my follow-up there, because my follow-up was about whether or not you all would have to come in for a special session. But if we don't know when the data will come, then it's very hard to say. Right. So I'll take one more question from the chat, and this one's from Diana Conway of the Women's Democratic Club. So Diana, if you'd like to ask your question about broadband. If not,
I would love to. So my question is, my call dropped 6 times while I was up county on the reserve. What's the story about extending broadband? I know there's federal interest in this. I know the Delaney's have an interest in this. Is there enough traction?
Oh, absolutely there is. And we put money into the budget to help that along. So hopefully it won't take too long to make it happen.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm gonna go back to so we are going until 8:30 was the program here. I'm gonna pull maybe one more question from the chat, because I see, you know, we are getting late into the evening, so I don't want to hold everybody until the very end. I'm going to pull maybe one more question from the pre-submitted questions, and then I'm going to start wrapping up. So this will be the last question then for the night. Pull up this list here real quick. So this question comes from Peter Anderson, and it's about each of your stances on the widening of 270 and the plan by Governor Hogan to expand, the toll lanes to Southern 270 and 495. So if you could each tell us a little bit about your positions on that.
I'll start on that one because I'm the one that's hung myself out there the most on it, I think. I don't have any preconceived notion for how it needs to happen. But I do think that there is a huge divide between the down county and the up county as far as what to do about transportation. I think down county, it is much easier to do transit. But where I am, close to 270, it's not nearly as practical as it is down county. I think something has to be done. If you look at the traffic on 270 any morning or any late afternoon, it is just completely clogged. And I don't buy the whole idea that we're going to force people to give up their cars to take transit, because it is not convenient enough in my part of the county for people to want to do that. We have a lot of people that come down from West Virginia, from Pennsylvania, from Northern Maryland on 270 every day. And it is not an easy or convenient way for them to travel down county to get on to anything. I mean, and the experience that I have, and any of you that see, if you go to Shady Grove in the morning, and you've got to take the train downtown, if you don't get there by like 7 o'clock, you don't park. There is nowhere to park. And when these 8-car trains get to Shady Grove coming back in the afternoon, it is dangerous when those full 8 cars of people empty out onto the platform at Shady Grove. So I think it's a noble idea to think at some point that we're going to get people out of their cars and have transit that's convenient for everybody. I just don't see it within the next 10, 20 years for it to happen. So I'm not saying that I've got one particular way to get it done. I'm just saying that I've got a very open mind as far as how we get it done. So there.
Thank you so much, Senator. Do any of the delegates want to?
I guess I can start. Nancy is right in a lot of what she just said. Nancy's actually right in all of what she just said, but especially when it comes to not being able to predict what the future is going to look like. I have actually been a very big critic of the governor's plan. I am not a critic of building highways in general, but I have found the governor's plan to be to have a lack of answers when we have questions, a inability to keep promises when they make promises and statements. The entire thing has been very shady, frankly. One of the things that really irks me, again, procurement nerd coming to the surface, is the way that we selected this Australian company. Presumably that there was an open procurement and it was all fair and on above board, and yet we've been talking to this company for a year and a half, giving them information and insight that no other bidder even had access to. There's a lot of questions about the way that the governor is pushing this plan. And frankly, there's a lot of different configurations that we can use on both 270 and 495 that have just not been considered. I'm actually happy that the governor has actually scaled it down. And in many ways, I think the current proposal matches what even the county executive, who has been a critic of the initial plan, has said we need to do, which is reversible lanes down the middle. We can add a little bit without expanding the footprint of 270, which we can do. And it will cost significantly less. And it will not require us to take anybody's property, and it will allow for traffic to flow smoothly. But if all we ever do is build highways, that's all we're ever gonna do. And I think that the COVID pandemic, if there has been a saving grace with it, has demonstrated to us in no uncertain terms that there are alternatives. Because if people start to telework a couple of days a week, they don't even have to do it the entire time. They telework a couple of days a week. We're going to see the amount of traffic on 270 reduce dramatically. And we've all seen it. I went into my office, my day job office, this week on Monday for the first time in 15 months. And even now, with everything reopening, traffic on 270 was a dream. It just kept going. It slowed down for a little bit because somebody, even with no traffic, somebody's still going to have an accident. But so it slowed down for a little bit with that. But it was still great. I got to DC in 30 minutes, to my office parking in 30 minutes. We can do it in multiple ways, but all this governor ever wants to do is pour concrete. And if every solution to your, if all you have is a hammer, every solution is a nail. And that's the approach that we've had. And he has not been transparent. He's not been open. I just don't trust him. And that ultimately is why I'm opposed to his plan, because at the end of the day, he has not been forthcoming, and I cannot support a multi-billion-dollar effort, the largest public-private partnership ever awarded in the history of the United States, when he's just not being honest with us. And that, to me, is my biggest problem. If I see a transparent, open, fair process, I'm okay with some expansion of highways, but this to me has been a big problem, and I just don't trust him.
Ditto.
Sure. I would just say that in my somewhat brief tenure as a legislator, between the unemployment insurance and the way transportation is handled in our state, those are the top two frustrations. And I mean, if I feel this way as a lawmaker, I can only imagine how people who are reading the news every day and trying to figure out what the heck is happening, like with 270 and the Purple Line. I think, you can't continue to build roads to think that this is the solution to the problem. The more people that we can get off of the roads, the better. And COVID, as Delegate Resnick mentioned, and as I say, I feel like every time I open my mouth, like there's new possibilities of how people work. That COVID has changed how people work and like the concept of what's even possible. We need to be rethinking what that looks like and getting people off of the roads and making commutes look different. As for the reversible lanes, to me, that seems like the most immediate low cost fix to this. But all of these decisions, including like decisions around development, have to be looked through the lens of like, how do we decrease the amount of people on the road? How do we increase public transit? It is a complicated issue, and it's even more complicated by the politics of it. And I would say, because this is a partisan call, this is all the more reason to elect a Democratic governor who will be reasonable on these issues, and we actually can get, real solutions to these things instead of, the gridlock that we see from the governor. Just to add my 2 cents on it.
You're here to a Democratic governor in 2022. Alrighty, thank you all so much. I'm going to start moving into the conclusion now. Oh, go ahead.
Real quick, Andrew, I ditto to what folks said. I do think we really need to stress investment in mass transit. I agree with Delegate Resnick. I think the governor's solution is to pour concrete, and that doesn't always work. We need to ensure we're getting folks off of the roads. So for those reasons, I mean, I don't support the governor's plan. I think when it comes to procurement, he's not the best person at all to handle something like that. If we looked at the way he handled the whole testing kits and the millions of dollars of our tax dollars that he wasted. So I agree, but I would just say that, we need to see multimodal transportation, and we need to see investments in mass transit, because that's how we help get people off the roads. That's how we have the kind of impact that we need on transit while moving a good bit of people from point A to point B.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Delegate Acevedo. I'm going to start moving into conclusion. I know Shruti Bhatnagar of the MCDCC would like to make an announcement as well. So Shruti, if you'd like to take the floor for a quick sec.
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. Hi, everyone. My name is Shruti Bhatnagar, and I'm a member of the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee from District 18, and I also co-chair the precinct organization for the Montgomery County Democratic Party. And I'm here to make a pitch for volunteers and for precinct leaders. I see some precinct leaders at this event from District 39, and which has an amazing team. So I just want to give a quick shout out to them, and also thank the District 39 and Germantown Democratic Club for their efforts in Up County. As Linda mentioned earlier, the Democratic Party is getting ready for door knocking when it is safe. And we need to make sure that every precinct has a precinct leader and a volunteer team. So just so you all know, District 39 has 26 precincts, and there is a need to fill some vacancies and also build a strong volunteer team. In 2020, the Montgomery County Democratic Party recruited and mobilized over 400 volunteers for the poll watching program, and we need the same energy and enthusiasm and capacity to work for the 2022 election, which is really important, as you heard several times today, to elect a Democratic governor, and because also it's a local election. So for those who are attending the event who are not precinct leaders, I just want to quickly mention that the precinct leaders are neighborhood volunteers. They're appointed by the Democratic Party. They're the conduit between the party and the voters, and they represent a single designated polling location for their area. They have an important role in organizing for the Democratic Party, so please consider volunteering. Invite a friend to join you, and recommend someone that you know to help us build a robust team of volunteers. It's a great way to connect with your community. Linda mentioned earlier, we had an orientation session earlier, and we will be having those to onboard precinct volunteers once a month. I'm also happy to schedule the time to review the information and answer any questions that you may have. I'll put my email in the chat, which is precinct@mcdcc.org. You can learn about the precinct volunteer information send me an email, and you can also check out the calendar on the website, mcdcc.org, for dates of upcoming sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shruti. And Delegate Lopez, you also wanted to make a brief announcement. Feel free to.
Sure, thank you. So as you gear up for all of the great 2022 stuff that Shruti was mentioning, if you want a low stakes volunteer opportunity to kind of prime the pump and get you ready, we're starting off senior wellness calls again. I have a small army of students who are getting SSL hours and a small team of volunteers, of retirees, and even a junior fire brigade who make these calls. Right now we're in vaccine territory. And to be totally honest, for the most part, it's you're calling and leaving messages on people's phones with the number and information on where to get vaccinated. And then from there, people or my office follows up with them if they have any questions or concerns. So it's we've gone through our first list of every senior, regardless of party affiliation. It took about a year. We finished in January on Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service, and now we're re-upping again now that we actually have vaccine information. So if you're interested, I think we're probably doing it once or twice a week just on Zoom, but then you make the calls individually. So it feels a bit like phone banking in a campaign setting, but nonpartisan and all virtual. So let me know if you're interested. We need all the help we can get. Thank you.
Great. And Delegate Acevedo, you also have an announcement. Feel free to go ahead there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, to the Germantown Democratic Club, Andrew, to the MCDCC, and everyone for joining the D39 team this evening. I just want to plug a community cleanup family day in District 39 that we'll be having in Germantown. I see Gaithersburg City Council member Lori-Ann Sales is on the call. She's helping to co-organize it. It's going to be in Germantown. We'll send out more information, but Saturday, May 8th, just working to ensure that we're not just cleaning up, but providing resources. We know that Up County has a serious issue, whether it's vaccine inequity, food insecurity, and particularly the trailer park at Middlebrook Gardens is where we need to be focusing, not our efforts as a community, but folks who really want to help those who really need that help right now. So look out for more information. I want to thank Councilmember Lori-Ann Sales and other folks, and especially if you live in Germantown and you want to join us and come out, we'd be really happy to see you. So thanks again.
All righty. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Special thanks to the District 39 Democratic Club for your leadership on this, Avis and Sharon and Peter. So thank you all so much for that. Thank you to the MCDCC and Michael and Linda for your leadership. Thank you to Senate Majority Leader Nancy King, delegates Kirill Resnick, Leslie Lopez, and Gabriel Acevedo, who have been such strong advocates for all of us in Germantown and in District 39, in Annapolis, this legislative session. We look forward to seeing all the work that's ahead in the next legislative session. And thank you all so much.
Can I just
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to say we had 75 people sign up for this tonight, and you know, a few years ago we were looking hard for volunteers and people that were interested in the Up County, and and you with the Germantown Democratic Club and Avis with the District 39 Club. I just think that it's a good showing. I think we've got a lot of people interested, and I congratulate all of you for helping to put all that together. And we can only go up from here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. All righty. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice evening.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
Have a good
Thank you.
weekend. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Hi, everyone.
Good night.